Well, welcome everybody to the barbecue episode. As we get closer to the nice grilling season, when it stops snowing in Somerset, which I suspect is August, somewhere mid-August, it'll stop snowing. You might decide you want to barbecue. And one of my favorite things about barbecue um, is really just it's sort of this common person thing. It's not high cuisine, but you can elevate it and do really spectacular dishes. Since time began, humans, hunted and gathered and killed and then gathered together by the fire. And if you think about it, I've always found it fascinating that in all ancient cultures, almost all, there was an offering presented to the gods, and that offering was almost always meat over hot charcoal. So even back in the day, people knew that gods really loved barbecued meat, and how could they not? Um, so a couple things that we're going to do today. We're going to tackle barbecue sauces. We're going to tackle hot sauce, and to start out with, we're going to do ribs tonight for dinner. So there's lots of different approaches to ribs. There's no one sure bullet, that everybody uses. I will simply let you know how I like to do my ribs, and folks can agree to disagree. The first thing is I don't sauce the ribs to begin with the cooking process. I find if you sauce it, what happens is the fat content and the drippings of the protein will start to mend with that barbecue sauce, and they just kind of become slimy and greasy. That's really not what we want. So instead, what I like to do is start my ribs in the oven with what is called a dry rub. And rest me here. So what I've done ahead of time is prepared my dry rub, which is, and again, after I record this and upload it onto the YouTube channel, you'll see the recipes, so you can write them down. But essentially, it's brown sugar, paprika, a tiny little bit of cumin, tiny little bit of cinnamon, oregano, basil, salt, pepper. Again, be conscious if you have folks with high blood pressure, or heart conditions, not to add salt to things. Onion powder, chili, paprika, cayenne, depending on how much heat you want to add to it. And then if I'm cooking chicken, I'll use rosemary as well, or thyme. And that's essentially it. And so I've got my ribs out. These are baby back ribs. And all we're going to do is literally just dust them. You don't want to pack it. If you start packing it on there, and that's kind of a thing that people do sometimes, it becomes a crust. And then as the brown sugar caramelizes, you get that burnt, crusty exterior. We don't want that. So just want to make sure you're real well mixed. And we're just going to lightly dust our ribs. Make sure you get the seasoning all over. And what I do is I start my ribs in the oven. The oven is preheated at 350. And I'm going to start them in there for an hour and 15 minutes at 350. Okay, once we have that well seasoned, flip them back over. If you're going to buy ribs, I highly recommend you find a meat packer. The cost is just unbelievably different. I know there's a couple meat packing plants in the area, or shops, butcher shops if you have one. The price differential is going to be tremendous. So just save yourself a ton of money. Another one is called Cheflicks out by where my family farm is. And you'll end up saving yourself $4 or $5 on a rack. So worth the savings. And just like that, we're just going to go into the oven. to start my timer for an hour and 15. When that's finished in the oven, I'll already have my charcoals ready to go, hypothetically. You know, if you were making dinner, you'd want to prep that ahead of time, have the charcoals ready, take your ribs out of the oven, and then 15 minutes on both sides. You'll want to start face down, meat side down on the grill, particularly charcoal grill is better. Flip it, 15 minutes on the other side, and you're done. So an hour and 15 minutes, I actually like to rest my ribs before I put them on the charcoal. And you want a medium heat. If you've got a gas grill, use a medium heat for 15 minutes. If you're using charcoal, make sure that the rack is really elevated off the charcoals. You don't want direct heat, or else again, you'll get that caramelization and that burning. That's no good. So unfortunately, you won't get to see the finished product because it won't be ready in time. But after the hour and 15, I'll pull that out, let it rest, and then again, 15 minutes on both sides on the grill. Now, what I'll typically do is if I'm gonna, because I like charcoal grilling, and it's expensive to keep buying charcoal, so I'll try to do all my week's grilling at the same time. So for instance, I've got wings I'm gonna do, I'll do the ribs, and then I'll do burgers and maybe a couple hot dogs for the kids or something. Just take care of it all at once, and then there's your meals for the week. The next topic we're gonna talk about is barbecue sauce. So there are three basic types of barbecue sort of sauce, if you're addressing the protein, if you will. The first is the heretic sauce. This is the Carolina mustard sauce. So I'm not a big fan, but some people are. I'll include the recipe at the end. I'm not making it simply because, you know, I'm not going to make a big batch of something I'm not going to use. But essentially, you want to start out with mustard. Now, when we say mustard, what I would recommend is Coleman's. This is Coleman's old-fashioned English mustard. Also, if you're going to make beef Wellington, this is the mustard you want to use. It's not like a French's yellow mustard. It has a different flavor spectrum to it. But this is what you would use for your mustard barbecue sauce. It's apple cider vinegar, yellow mustard, brown sugar, Worcestershire, garlic powder, cayenne, and salt. That's it. You just mix all that together. It's okay. It'll have that mustardy, tangy kind of thing. I just happen to really like the traditional tomato-based sweet barbecue sauce. Rubs are an entirely different universe, so I wouldn't call them a sauce because technically they're dry. What makes rubs really cool too is that you can combine anything you want to create the flavor patterns that you're interested in. And then hot sauce. So what I've prepared today is a Serrano hot sauce. I've already cooked it ahead of time. What you'll find in here are 5 Serrano peppers. You'll want to clean, stem, open them up, and de-seed them. The seed of a pepper is where the capsicum comes from, the actual spice and heat. So the more seeds you take out, the less spicy the sauce is going to be. In this case, it is plain white wine vinegar, 2 cups, 5 Serrano peppers, half cleaned and de-seeded, 3 clove garlics bruised or crushed. So you can chop garlic cloves, or with the blade of your knife flat down on it, using your palm on top, you apply pressure. Now the reason you just need to bruise these is because it's going into the blender. So you can chop them up if you want. You just don't need to take the time. Just bruise them, stick them in there. So you've got your white wine vinegar, pepper, your peppers, your onions. I used a half of a rough dice. Again, you're just chopping the onion and throwing it in there. And you're going to reduce all that. And then at the end, I add 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Just really more for color than anything else. Now that that's all together, we're just going to go straight into the blender. The reason I chose Serranos is just because I had them in my garden last year and I froze some. You can freeze hot peppers and they stay pretty good. I will recommend that when you're doing this at home, all of my windows were open because you're basically making pepper spray in your kitchen. The aroma of that pungent aroma of the vinegar and the hot pepper permeates the air. So leave your windows open when you're reducing the liquids down. Barney came in earlier and he sniffed like twice and he shook his head and turned and walked away. It's a really powerful aroma. There we go. So our lid is secured. We're just going to start with a chop and then move to puree. And we'll just double check and make sure that we're getting all those pieces nice and liquefied in there. Once that's finished, I'll go ahead and put it into a plastic squirt bottle that I've cleaned and sanitized ahead of time. Not because my funnels are all gone. Smells absolutely heavenly. Now, whenever I'm making these sauces, one thing I recommend is that whatever you're going to put this in, whatever kind of container, if it's a squirt bottle or anything like that, only use it for that purpose from then on. So this bottle is always used for hot sauce because that flavor is so strong and the spice is so strong, it'll actually almost permeate into the plastic. So if I wanted to put something else in here, like if I was making an aioli or a homemade mayo or anything like that, it would actually end up sort of overpowering it with the flavor of hot sauce. I'm not actually going to clean it too much because what I'm making next is a tomato-based barbecue sauce. And instead of adding pure spice to it by adding jalapeno or serrano, it's going to have just that little bit of kick in there already from the hot sauce we just made. One thing you should be aware of, because this is still fairly warm, is you never want to refrigerate anything while it's hot or warm, unless you're specifically trying to cool it down for later purposes. The reason being, it's a great way to grow bacteria. It'll also help foodborne illness along as well. So whenever you're going to put something in the refrigerator later, just make sure it's already cooled down properly. All right, so next we're going to talk about just your classic barbecue sauce, how to make it from scratch. Now earlier, I already rendered off bacon fat. So I just cooked the bacon in the pan and then I ate the bacon instead of leaving it for anyone else because I'm greedy like that. But what I've done in the bacon fat is finished off onion, again, rough chop. You don't have to worry about the precision of it. Just a rough chopped onion. Again, 3 cloves of garlic bruised by pressing down on the blade of the knife. You always want to use the beefy side of the knife so you don't put fracture stress on it. So we've got the garlic cloves, the onion that's already been in the bacon fat, and then to that we're going to add half a cup of white vinegar. I've already seasoned it with pepper. And we're going to add 2 cups tomato sauce. We're going to add a tablespoon of mustard. We're going to add 2 splashes of Worcestershire sauce. For those who don't know, Worcestershire is actually what we call a bouquet. So what they do is they take herbs and literally cook them down until they become a black goo. That's all Worcestershire is just all these herbs and flavors and spices that have just been reduced into like a black goo. We're going to integrate all of those together just to get them combined. Once you have a little heat on that pan, we're going to add brown sugar, a 1/4 cup of there we go. Stir that around. Again, just sort of integrating all those flavors and spices. And you'll want to keep that on a medium heat for a little bit so it starts to reduce. And while that's reducing, we're going to work on another one of my favorite dishes. Whenever I'm barbecuing, I want to have all of these different flavors on the plate. So we've got sweet, we've got spicy, we've got acidity, we've got tang. We want to have as many of the flavors on the palate as we possibly can. One way I like to do that is with a dish called corn salsa. This is super easy and the folks are going to love it at your picnics and barbecues. So in here I've taken a half an onion, just a plain Spanish onion, and minced it really fine, and one bag of frozen niblets, the corn frozen niblets. So that's all thawed finally. To that, I'm going to add 2 bell peppers. I like to, just for color's sake, use red and orange and green if you have it, and a quarter of a serrano pepper. The purpose of this particular dish is not to knock anybody's socks off with spice. It's just to give it a little bit of a kick. I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of lime juice. You're going to add a cup of red wine vinegar. Two cloves of garlic minced is already in there. I've already cleaned cilantro. I've got 4 sprigs worth. Make sure you clean your cilantro. It's a dirty little herb. It gets really dirty. It gets that grit and sand texture. Nobody likes that. In fact, it's interesting. There are some people who don't like cilantro. They say it tastes like soap. And that's actually not a personal preference thing. That's actually their brain telling them, hey, this tastes like soap, dummy. And all I'm doing is bruising this, tearing it up a little bit. You can chop it if you like. It's incredibly tedious work. I just think this is just a little bit quicker, just to tear it, bruise it, tear it up and toss it in there. And then finally, I've got just 1 whole beefsteak tomato in a simple dice. And we're going to stir that up. And then to this, I'll add a tablespoon of pepper. Actually, make that 3/4 tablespoon. You don't want to go too crazy. And just a pinch of salt. It doesn't need a ton of salt because it's got all the acidity from the lime and from the red wine vinegar, which I'll add a little more of. Just because, and as you make this dish, you'll figure it out for yourself. You'll see if it's dry or not, if it needs a little more liquid, and then taste as you go. You'll know right away. You'll say, oh, that needs more lime juice, or that could use another shot of pepper. So what's nice about this dish again is you can see the colors are just really pretty. Um, and so if you're having something like, ribs with barbecue, you've got the sweet, you've got the spicy from the hot sauce. You've got probably baked beans, homemade fries. And I just think this corn salsa dish is simple. You saw how easy that was to make. And it's light and fresh. It's a great summertime meal. And when it's finished, all you can do is throw some saran wrap on top and toss it in the fridge, and it's ready to serve. I would recommend making that at least 2.5 to 3 hours before service, so that all those flavors have a chance to marry together really well. Okay, so our basic barbecue sauce here is pretty much ready to go. Now, normally that's it. That's barbecue sauce, and it would go into the blender, and again you'll puree it until it's just a nice smooth liquid. Now, what I love about barbecue is that a few years ago, and by that I mean probably about 30 years ago, thank God for women chefs, because they started integrating all of these wonderful flavors into barbecue sauces that we never would have used before. What do I mean by that? Particularly fruits. So some fruits that go really well. Watermelon. You can puree a watermelon and then add it to your tomato-based barbecue. It just gives it a round out of a nice, sweet, tangy barbecue sauce. Mango does really well. Strawberries. And there were all these great female barbecue chefs who suddenly started introducing the rest of us primitive dumb men into all these different alternatives. Now, another alternative that you might want to think about is liquid smoke. So if you're not going to use a charcoal grill, if you're just using gas grill, or if you're just going to like bake chicken and you want to use a barbecue sauce, just throw in literally pour into the cup of liquid smoke and toss it in, and it'll give you that rich, smoky flavor. But since I'm basically going to be charcoal smoking these ribs on the grill later anyway, I'm not too worried about that flavor. What I'm going to do for you guys today is one of my secret sauces, one of my favorite sauces, and that is my apple cinnamon bourbon barbecue sauce. So we have our regular sauce. I'm just really kind of waiting for it to cool down because I don't want to put it into the blender when it's hot. But what I have here, this is one Granny Smith apple, skin, cored, and chopped. You don't have to go crazy and worry about the chopping. It's going into the blender anyway. And you don't have to worry about it becoming brown or sitting out at room temperature. Again, it's going into a sauce, no big deal. And then what essentially is 2 shots of Fireball cinnamon whiskey. The reason I like using this is twofold. The first is they use a cinnamon extract in the whiskey. So it's almost like that pure concentrated cinnamon taste. It just marries perfectly with the apple. The reason I'm also making this sauce today is because I'm making pork ribs, right? We've got baby back ribs in here. And there is no better marriage with pork than apples and cinnamon. The Germans figured this out. Also, clove goes really well. So what I'm going to do is add my apples to the blender. I'm going to add my cinnamon whiskey. And then I'm going to take that glass and just add a little shot of water. that essentially is just pureed apples. It's almost apple juice, essentially. To which I'm going to add and fold back into the barbecue sauce. Oh, God, that smells amazing. Now, before I put that into the blender, I'm going to taste it. Oh, that is really, really good. Now we're ready. Blend this sauce. One of the reasons I love this particular sauce again is get the tang from the vinegar, you get the sweet from the apple, you get the shot of cinnamon, you get the onion and the garlic, and it's rounded out by the earthy tomato. It literally hits every note on the palate. And there you go. Be nice and smooth and creamy. Now, you'll notice it's a little loose right now. It's because it's hot. So what I'm going to do is cool this a little bit. I'm going to pour it into this bowl and just let it sit at room temperature for a while. And now if I look at it later and I'm concerned because it's still too loose, meaning it's watery, maybe I'll put it back on the burner and reduce it down just a little bit. But it's in its final product form now. The other reason I'm going to let this sit is after my ribs are done at 1 hour and 15 at 350, I'll let them rest. Then I'm going to grill them 15 minutes, flesh side down. Then when I flip them and it's bone side, then I'll baste it with a little bit of this barbecue sauce, remove them, let them rest, and baste them with the barbecue sauce again. And then the rest of it I'll put into a little squirt bottle for everybody. So that is the basics of barbecue, and I'm willing to field any questions or concerns or thoughts you may have. Anybody? Questions? No? Okay. As usual, I'll upload this as soon as possible. It takes about 5 to 8 hours usually for this thing to export. And then I'll edit it and then add the recipes at the end and upload it. But for you guys, just continue to play around with sauces, add fruits, add vegetables, puree celery, puree carrot, and add it to your barbecue sauce to make it even more rich. And the world is literally your oyster with sauces. Just have fun, have at it, and enjoy and barbecue your heart's content.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.